So, 2016 is not off to a good start. In addition to losing David Bowie, who, as some of you may know, I was a pretty big fan of, I did write a tribute to him on my Alex and His Pen blog, so if you want to read that, I'm going to include a link to that in the video description on the YouTube page if you're watching this on YouTube. But while that wound still hasn't fully healed, we recently lost Alan Rickman. And I was a pretty big fan of his work too. He was such a great actor, and he had the voice. I just adored that man's voice. I mean, he had one of the great voices, like up there with James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman in terms of great voices. And you know, the kinds of movies he did were a big part of my life, and a lot of the movies and he's been in so many movies I liked. I'm gonna get to his two most iconic roles, but the first one I want to start by talking about is his performance in Galaxy Quest, because that was the first movie I ever saw him in. My memories, I'll admit it's a little hazy on this, because I was about 12 at the time, so it's kind of hard for me to remember whether I saw Galaxy Quest or Dogma first, but I believe I saw Galaxy Quest first. So if nothing else, I remember that as the first time I saw Alan Rickman. And Galaxy Quest is a great movie. I mean, even though, it's, you know, it's kind of got what I like to call the Three Amigos plot, but I think out of all the movies to do a plot where actors or entertainers are mistaken for real heroes, I think Galaxy Quest did it the best, because it's not just about them being it's not just about characters who are about actors being mistaken for their real life heroes. It's about how fictional works can actually have an impact on people, and Alan Rickman plays a great part. He's the Shakespearean trained actor who's kind of resentful of his work. I just think this is such a great performance, because there are so many people out there who are like that, who have had these roles that are iconic, but, you know, it's become the only thing they're known for, so they kind of resent that. Like Alec Guinness, great actor, and I loved him as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but you did not want to hear his opinion on that part. William Shatner kind of went through a phase where he was resentful of his performance, where he was resentful of his work in Star Trek, but he's come to, from what I've heard, he's come to embrace it. But he plays someone who's resentful of his work. He hates saying his catchphrase, but when he realizes the impact that his work has had on the Thermians in the movies, he realizes that, you know, even if it's not what he aspired to be, this work can still have great meaning to other people. So even if it's coincidental that I'm bringing it up, so even if it's somewhat coincidental that it ended up being the first movie I saw him in, I still want to. I still kind of think that's a good way to tie in the man and his work, someone who could someone who his work as his work as Snape and other parts may have had that effect on other people. And on that note, the with Harry Potter, I am a fan, but I was kind of late to the party. But I loved Alan Rickman as Snape. This may be this may be his defining role, especially when you consider the fact that he played the part for 7 movies, 8 if you count the fact that Deathly Hallows was split up into 2 movies. For anyone curious, since I mentioned that my 2 favorites in the series are Chamber of Secrets and Deathly Hallows Part 2. And, throughout 7 films, we explored a lot of Snape's character, and one of the great things about Alan Rickman was the fact that he could play a good guy just as well as he could play a bad guy, and that's one of the things that made him such a perfect Snape. There was a little bit of gray area. He could be a little good, he seemed a little bad at times, he could be intimidating. It's one of those things where the actor just owned the performance. I mean, it is legitimately difficult for me to imagine anybody but Alan Rickman playing that role. And I read that he was J.K. Rowling's first choice, and she's the one, and she always imagined him playing that. So that just shows how in tune with the character Rickman was with playing Snape. The other iconic performance is Hans Gruber in Die Hard. This may be the one I've watched the most, just because, yes, I am one of those people who watches Die Hard at Christmas. And it's funny, I had seen that Die Hard is probably the movie that most people first saw Rickman in, that or Harry Potter. But it's funny, I had actually seen him in several other movies before I saw him in Die Hard. And Die Hard is such an important role in many ways for him. I mean, it's the movie that basically broke ground at he wasn't unknown. He was mostly a theater actor by that point, and but he had some film and television experience. But Die Hard was the film that launched him into film acting, and it's pretty easy to see why. I mean, he was this great complex villain. Die Hard is often credited with the movie that made the villain cool. That and Tim Burton's Batman are credited for doing that. And you have this great complex villain who has these great speeches, and he can be he kind of has some darkly humorous moments. I always crack up at the scene where John McClane asks him if he wants a cigarette, and he's like, yeah. I just love the sort of awkward way he answers that question. One of the other early films I saw him in was Dogma, where he has a great part as the Metatron, the voice of God. I sort of love that description, because it's like, yeah, voice. It's like, yeah, if you're gonna have the voice of God, then why not have Alan Rickman speak for you? He's not in a ton of that movie, but every scene he's in is excellent. I love the fact that he's both, this is the kind of role that it's pretty hard to imagine anybody but Alan Rickman playing, because Alan Rickman was good at playing really snarky roles, and Metatron is an incredibly snarky character. I but I mean, I kind of like the idea that he's supposed to be holy and divine, but he's really snarky as well. But at the same time, he actually does show these moments where he's actually really sweet and really kind. If you've never seen the movie, there's a twist in the middle I don't want to give away where somebody finds out, discovers this huge bombshell, and the Metatron has to comfort this character. And it is just this absolutely sweet moment, especially considering that up to that point this character had been so snarky and kind of a fuss bucket. And it is just a wonderful scene. I feel like that's one of the great attributes of Alan Rickman, that he could be wisecracking in one scene, but very touching and emotional in another scene. He played. There were a lot of movies I really liked him in as well. He did a great job in Michael Collins. Again, another movie he doesn't have a ton of screen time in, but he's still really good. I actually posted the funeral coda from that movie. I know I've mentioned before how much I love the score from that movie, especially that funeral coda. I actually posted that on my personal Facebook as sort of a tribute to Alan Rickman. It's like, you know, if you can have, I mean, it's like if you can have like a piece of music to play for someone, to associate with them that way. Some other roles I really liked him in. He had another good villain role was the judge in Sweeney Todd. Great performance, not just from an acting perspective, but he showed off he could sing as well. You know, another good song to play would be, for this time, some of my friends posted this, his duet with Johnny Depp, Pretty Women. Great scene. It's just, and it's sort of the antithesis of what we would expect from a villain song. It's building up to a more sinister intention, and both Sweeney Todd and the judge are singing about somewhat sinister plans, but they're singing this very pretty melodic song about women. And the way it sort of just builds and builds. That was a really good performance, and I've frequently mentioned Alan Rickman as an actor who I'm always so disappointed never got an Academy Award nomination. It's hard for me to put a button on exactly why. I feel like he kind of had a similar problem to what actors like Kevin Bacon and even Gary Oldman, who has an Academy Award nomination. I feel like he acted in a lot of movies that unfortunately don't always get a lot of Oscar attention. But in a way, I feel like that was kind of awesome on his part, that he had this Oscar caliber acting, but he was bringing it to a lot of movies where you wouldn't always see that kind of acting. And I don't have a lot to say about this one, but he was another good villain role in Quigley Down Under. Pretty good movie. Pretty good Western. It's another movie I really like the score. He's a little more droll in that movie. I always loved the way Rickman could play droll so well. It's one of his more droll villain roles. I know I mentioned him already and how much I liked his voice, so it should seem natural that he would do some that he did his share of voiceover work. I really liked him as the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. Again, a role where he played oh, and I'm just gonna say, yes, I like that movie. What of it? But he was very wise. He was very comforting. He was very friendly. And I looked on Rickman's page after I heard the news about his passing, and it's like, I know he's going to be in the sequel, so that could very well be his last role. Another one I really liked was his performance as Marvin in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you're not familiar with the books, Marvin is the most depressed android in the universe. He is just such a downer and a depressive case. He can't be cheered up, and Rickman is just so funny in this role. He plays it with the exact performance that he should, just always gloomy and always down. Oh, so great role. If you've never seen that movie, the film adaptation of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is not perfect. I'm a big fan of the books now, and I'll tell you right now, if you've read the books, you might notice they cut some pretty good jokes, but I still consider it a pretty solid adaptation, and if they ever remade Hitchhikers, I think they'd be very hard pressed to find a better Marvin than Alan Rickman. Though to be fair, there was a BBC version that had a pretty good Marvin, but when I saw the movie before I read all the books, so I imagined Alan Rickman reading all of those lines. It's funny I should talk about a character that was all saddened, because, not gonna lie, that's kind of how losing Alan Rickman has left me feeling. It's kind of funny. I mean, his death made me so sad, but talking about his work, and how good his work made me feel, that reminded me of what a great presence he was, which, well, I'd just like to conclude by saying, by Grabthar's hammer, by the sons of Warvan, you shall be remembered.